Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is one of several pressure washers that I've acquired over the years that were supposed to be projects that I hadn't been getting around to, and lately I've been really wanting to use a pressure washer. In particular, I want to pressure wash all of that junk and growth all over the JCB backhoe. So what I plan on doing is getting one of these things going, and if I can't get it going, at least I'll know, well, move on to the next one, right? So we'll start with this one because this one is fairly complete. Actually, it is complete. I think it's got all of the nozzles on it, and I think this was running, according to the people I bought this from, and was just had an oil leak. So we'll see what the situation is on this thing. It is very dirty. It's been sitting, and the fuel tank is bone dry. There's not a drop in there, so I guess that's not bad news. I think I'd rather see the tank bone dry than see old stale fuel in there. Although we'll see what the carburetor looks like. If it needs to be taken apart and cleaned, we'll take a look and see what kind of situation is in there. So what do we got? We got a Briggs and Stratton 675 series, because it's 130cc or 6.75 horsepower Briggs. This is very similar to my old Craftsman lawnmower. This looks very similar to that lawnmower I have. The difference is there's a plug on the end here, and on mine, where this plug is, there's a primer bulb. And on this one, we've got a manual choke, which I actually prefer. Primer bulbs, you can get a problem where the seal isn't really good between some of the parts, and so then they don't work really well, or the primer bulb itself can go bad over time. The rubber gets all cracked and starts to leak. Whereas a butterfly that you just manually move with the lever is pretty foolproof. I'm just going to pop this air cleaner cover off and see what we got. Yeah, this is the same kind of setup as that Craftsman. Filter actually looks pretty decent. This looks pretty clean in here too. Well, it wouldn't hurt to throw a little fuel in it and see whether or not it'll start. Alright, I don't want to put too much fuel in that tank in case I end up having a leaking carburetor, or if I end up having to take the tank off and drain it. So let's see, we got a throttle control here, and then we got a choke. So that's choke open, that's closed. I don't see a key switch or anything like that. And I did notice that this throttle control right here, all the way over, it says is stop. So it's probably got a kill wire underneath there in the carburetor linkage. Well, I guess we're going to put a hose on that thing, huh? Alright, got a bit of a leak on the back here, but that's just, I need a thick rubber washer to go in the coupling where the hose hooks onto the pump. But I don't see any water leaking out of the pump itself, which is a good sign. Sometimes these things are left, you know, outside or in an outdoor shed, someplace where they could freeze in the wintertime, and if the water is left in the pump, it can expand and crack the pump housing. Alright, let's see. What if it'll start without the choke? Nope. Alright, let's choke that side. Oh, I got it in the stop position, dum-dum. Water and electricity don't mix, so that's what's going on there. Alright, let's see if we can figure out why that oil is leaking. Alright, so I cleaned up this whole area here so that if oil continues to leak here, I'll be able to notice it right away. And the other thing I did was I checked the level on the dipstick. So the level on the dipstick is actually pretty pretty good. There's a very small range here that you've got for full and add, like about 1/4 of an inch. So goes without saying, you want to make sure you're on level ground when you're checking this engine's oil. And you can see I'm like right almost halfway between the two, almost perfect. If it was overfilled, that could cause it to blow oil out of the vent tube and it would leak down and make a mess. That could be one possibility to cause an oil leak, overfilling it, which isn't very common. But what is common is you can have a sticking float in the carburetor that allows gas to continue to run out of the tank, overflow the carburetor, and run down into the engine. And then it can run down past the rings and into the crankcase and overfill the crankcase. And then when you start the engine, that high volume in there will cause it to force that mixture of oil and fuel out through the breather and cause a leak. But that's not the case here. It's interesting to me that it almost appears to be leaking right at where the cylinder head meets the cylinder. In fact, now look at more closely, almost looks like there's a leak right around these cylinder head bolts. So I am going to go grab a socket and we'll see whether or not those need tightening. So it's real common on a lot of these L-head Briggs, these ones that have the L-head engines, which what I mean by L-head is this has the valves in the block. So if we were to take off this cylinder head, we would see the tops of the valves and the top of the cylinder with the piston in it, as opposed to an overhead valve configuration. But it's real common on the L-head models here for these bolts to loosen up a little bit and cause oil to leak past the bolt shanks and come out here and drip down, and that's what I believe is going on here. As a matter of fact, you can actually see kind of some clues to that. If you look, you'll notice that these bolts all kind of have a white look to them, and they've got a little bit of rust on them. And these right here are pretty much protected from rust by the fact that they've been well oiled. So it's important to periodically torque these, because what can happen is if you leave it loose long enough and it gets bad enough, the gap can actually open up to the point where exhaust gases can make their way past the cylinder head gasket and start eroding away and blowing out that cylinder head gasket material to the point where it'll blow your cylinder head gasket. When you blow your cylinder head gasket, if it doesn't blow out right here, what's going to happen is it's going to force all of that combustion pressure down those openings of the valves, and it's going to pressurize the crankcase, and it's going to cause it to want to blow oil out of places that you don't want oil coming out of. So on a lot of these, it's common for these 3 bolts right here to be loose. Looks like I've got a shield. I've got to get out of the way to get to that one bolt there, unless I can. Yeah, it's kind of, see, they got a hole here as if like you're going to get to that bolt, but you're not really going to. So I got to get this little screw out, and it looks like we got a screw missing there. Oh, I don't know, maybe there wasn't one in there. This bar is kind of in the way here of getting to this with the regular nut driver, so I was looking for an excuse to use my Skew Driver Pro Kit. So if you've never seen one of these doohickeys before, this is essentially an offset, almost like a nut driver type of deal that gives you some more versatility. All right. Today our torque du jour is going to be 165 inch-pounds. It's going to be in inch-pounds, the spec for these. If you look up your particular engine's model number, which I may do that after, but for right now I'm just going to start with 165 inch-pounds. I think I've seen as high as 220 inch-pounds in some of the larger ones. But anyways, the key here is inch-pounds. You don't accidentally want to think foot-pounds, because you will snap these bolts like nothing. So I'm going to do a staggered pattern as if I was installing the head for the first time, even though some of these are probably going to be tight. So let's start with this upper side here. Yeah, so that one's already tight. So let's go to this one, which I suspect is going to be loose. And it is. So that one did turn. Not much, but it doesn't take much. Now let's go over to this corner. That one also turned. This corner, nothing. Okay. Bottom middle. That one definitely turned. Middle top. Oh, that one turned a little. Left. Nothing. And this one. That one turned quite a bit. Look at that one. Yeah. So again, typically you see these three right here often are the ones that are the culprits, and I think that's because they're closest to the exhaust port and they get a lot of heating and cooling. You know, the engine gets really hot running and then you shut it down, it cools down. And the heating and cooling, expansion and contraction, I think is what causes the problem on these. Alright, I'm just going to see if I can find the exact torque spec for this before I cut it loose. Well, this is the 675 series Briggs, but I need the exact model or spec number of the engine to find the head bolt torque, and I can't find it on that motor. So I got a label on the body of the, you know, the frame there, but that's the Troy Bilt number for the whole thing. And then when you look that up, all it tells you is that consult the manufacturer of the engine for the specs and parts for the engine. So I think I'm going to be okay with that setting I used, a 165 inch-pounds. And I think a low of, I think some of those, I had a spec sheet, and I think most of the ones that are the aluminum block with steel sleeve cylinders like this one were 165 L head. So I think it should be all set. Alright, so let's put this thing to work and run it a bit, and then we'll check for leaks again. Well, I just finished cleaning this entire backhoe. I was at it for probably an hour anyways, and the thing is working flawlessly. More importantly, there's no sign of any more oil leak. So I feel pretty confident right now that the oil leak that the previous owner was experiencing was simply the loose head bolts. Alright, I guess that's going to close this one out. I promise you the next pressure washer I work on is going to be probably a little more troublesome to repair, because the next one only cost me 20 bucks. And it didn't have the hose or the wand on it. They had already stripped the parts off of it, so I don't know, that might be a junker, but I took a chance on it. Till next time, again, if you like the video, please hit the like button. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing. Take care.